podcast line that started a Lakers firestorm. LeBron James thought he was controlling the story. Instead, he may have opened the one door he could never close again. One sentence, one podcast clip, one calm explanation about why the Lakers fell short. That was all it took for the internet to explode, for Lakers fans to turn their heads, and for one uncomfortable question to hit the middle of the room. When LeBron said the Lakers did not have enough talent, was he only talking about the front office, or was he also talking about his own son? Because this was not just another superstar giving an honest postseason answer. This was LeBron James, the most powerful player of his generation, sitting in front of a camera and saying the team failed because the talent gap was too big. On the surface, it sounded like basketball analysis. But once fans slowed the clip down, the meaning became much heavier. The Lakers roster was not built in silence. It was shaped around LeBron's timeline, LeBron's influence, LeBron's preferences, and, most importantly, LeBron's dream of sharing an NBA locker room with Bronny James. For years, that dream was sold as a beautiful father-son story, a historic moment, a legacy chapter, a once-in-a-lifetime basketball image. But now, after the losses, after the pressure, after the criticism, that same story is starting to look different. Because when LeBron says the roster lacked talent, Bronny is part of that roster. When LeBron says the Lakers did not have enough help, people immediately ask who helped create that situation. And when a father's legacy mission becomes a team's roster problem, the drama stops being only about basketball. That is why this story is spreading so fast. It has everything NBA fans cannot look away from. Power, pressure, family, ego, front office tension, and a young player trapped under the biggest shadow in the sport. So before we go deeper, comment where you are watching from. If you think LeBron was out of line, press 1. If you think the Lakers front office deserves the blame, press 2. And subscribe, because this story is just getting started. The statement that changed everything. At first, many fans thought the backlash was overblown. After all, what is a superstar supposed to say after a disappointing playoff exit? Teams lose, players get frustrated, executives get criticized. That is part of professional sports. But the more people listened to LeBron's comments, the more uncomfortable the situation became. The problem was not simply that he said the Lakers lacked talent. The problem was the timing. The Lakers had just gone through months of intense pressure. Injuries had piled up. Expectations were sky high. Every possession was being analyzed by national media. Yet instead of focusing on the challenges the team faced together, the conversation instantly shifted toward what the roster supposedly lacked. And once that happened, fans started connecting dots. Who helped influence roster decisions over the last several years? Who had more organizational power than almost any player in modern NBA history? Who was involved in nearly every major conversation surrounding the team's direction? Whether fair or unfair, many fans arrived at the same answer: LeBron. That is where the criticism became much more serious, because now the discussion was no longer about basketball strategy. It became about accountability. Some fans argued that LeBron was simply being honest. Oklahoma City was younger, deeper, faster, and more athletic. There is nothing controversial about acknowledging reality. Others saw something completely different. They believed the comments sounded like an attempt to create distance between himself and the team's failure. Instead of "we failed," they heard "the roster failed." Instead of shared responsibility, they heard separation. And in today's NBA media environment, perception can become reality almost overnight. The clip spread across social media. Sports shows debated it for days. Former players weighed in. Analysts began revisiting years of Lakers decisions, asking whether the franchise had sacrificed too much flexibility in order to maximize LeBron's championship window. Suddenly, what started as a simple podcast conversation transformed into a much larger debate about influence, power, and responsibility. Even more interesting was the reaction from Lakers fans themselves. Many remained loyal to LeBron and defended him aggressively. They pointed to his production, his leadership, and everything he had already accomplished for the franchise. But another group started asking difficult questions. If the roster truly lacked talent, how did the Lakers end up in that position? Who benefited from many of those roster moves? And perhaps most importantly, who should be held accountable when the results fail to match expectation? Those questions were only getting louder because behind the scenes, another storyline was quietly gaining momentum. A storyline involving Bronny James, the enormous expectations surrounding him, and the pressure that comes with carrying one of the most famous last names in sports history. And once that conversation started, the entire drama entered a completely different level. The Bronny problem nobody wanted to talk about. For most young players entering the NBA, The challenge is simple. Earn minutes, develop your game, prove that you belong. Bronny James never had that luxury. From the moment he entered the league, he was carrying a burden that almost no rookie in NBA history has ever faced. Every shot, every turnover, every missed assignment, and every minute on the court was being viewed through one question. Would he be here if his last name wasn't James? That question followed him everywhere. It followed him into training camp, it followed him into regular season games, and it followed him into every conversation surrounding the Lakers. To be fair, none of that pressure was created by Bronny himself. By all accounts, he was doing what every young player dreams of doing, working, improving, and trying to build a professional career. But unlike other prospects, he wasn't being judged against fellow rookies. He was being judged against expectations that were impossible to meet. Every time he stepped onto the floor, people weren't just watching Bronny, they were watching LeBron's son. And those are two very different things. The reality is that the NBA is ruthless. Fans don't care about family stories when wins and losses are on the line. Front office don't survive on sentimental moments. Championship contenders don't hand out roster spots because a storyline looks good on television. Eventually, performance becomes the only thing that matters. That reality created a difficult situation for everyone involved. For Bronny, every struggle became national news. For the Lakers, every minute he played became a debate. For LeBron, every conversation about Bronny eventually circled back to his own influence. And that is where the pressure started building. Because as criticism of the roster increased, fans began revisiting the decisions that led to this point. Some wondered whether the Lakers had become too focused on creating a historic father-son moment. Others questioned whether basketball decisions had become mixed with personal goals. Neither side completely agreed, but one thing was clear: the spotlight was no longer on the team's playoff loss. The spotlight was now on the entire process that brought Bronny to Los Angeles. And for the first time, some Lakers fans began asking a question they never expected to ask. Was Bronny being given a fair opportunity to develop, or had he been placed into an impossible situation from the very beginning? Because if the expectations were unrealistic, then every criticism would be amplified. Every mistake would look bigger. Every bad game would become another headline. And as the noise around the team continued growing, tension was beginning to rise in places fans couldn't see. Inside the organization, frustration was quietly building. Inside the media, questions were multiplying. And inside the James family itself, the pressure was becoming impossible to ignore. That is where the story takes its most dramatic turn. Because what happened next was no longer just about basketball. It became personal. When the story became personal, for years, the public image was almost perfect. LeBron James was not just building a basketball legacy. He was building a family legacy. Every interview seemed to reinforce the same message. Every appearance strengthened the same narrative. One day, father and son would share an NBA court. One day, history would be made. One day, the basketball world would witness something that had never happened before. Fans loved the story. Sponsors loved the story. The media loved the story. But behind every great story is a reality that usually looks far more complicated. Because dreams become much harder to manage once real pressure arrives. Winning solves almost everything in professional sports. Losing exposes everything. And after the Lakers fell short, the cracks started showing. The conversation was no longer about the emotional father-son journey. It was about expectations, responsibility, and consequences. For the first time, people began questioning whether Bronny was actually benefiting from the situation. Think about it. Most young players enter the NBA with room to grow. They are allowed to struggle, allowed to fail, allowed to learn. Bronny never received that privilege. Every bad game became a headline. Every quiet performance became a debate. Every statistic became ammunition for critics. Instead of developing away from the spotlight, he was developing directly underneath it. And that spotlight was created by the biggest name in basketball. That is why the situation became so uncomfortable. Because whether people supported LeBron or criticized him, almost everyone could agree on one thing. Bronny did not create the expectations surrounding himself. Those expectations already existed before he played his first professional game. They were built by media coverage. They were built by public anticipation. And they were built by years of discussions about a historic father-son NBA partnership. As losses mounted and criticism increased, that pressure became heavier. Suddenly, every roster discussion somehow led back to Bronny. Every debate about talent led back to Bronny. Every conversation about the future led back to Bronny. Imagine being a young player trying to establish your own identity while hearing millions of people argue about whether you belong. Imagine trying to improve while being compared not to other rookies, but to one of the greatest players who ever lived. That is not a normal development path. That is a microscope, and microscopes reveal every flaw. The deeper this story went, the more observers began wondering whether Bronny was trapped inside a situation that nobody could realistically win. If he struggled, critics would say he never belonged. If he succeeded, people would claim he only got opportunities because of his father. It was a no-win scenario, and while fans argued online, another battle was quietly forming behind the scene because not everyone inside the Lakers organization was happy with how things had unfolded. Some executives were beginning to ask difficult questions. Questions about roster construction, questions about long-term planning, questions about how much influence any one player should truly have. And if those tensions continued growing, the relationship between LeBron and the Lakers could be heading toward its biggest crossroads yet. The Lakers front office starts pushing back. Inside every NBA franchise, there is a line that separates superstar influence from organizational control. With LeBron James, that line has always been blurry. For most of his career, teams have understood the deal. If LeBron is on your roster, you listen, you adjust, you build around him, you chase veterans, you sacrifice future assets. You do whatever it takes because having LeBron means championship pressure starts immediately, but in Los Angeles, that pressure reached a different level. The Lakers were not just trying to win. They were trying to win while managing LeBron's timeline. Anthony Davis's health, fan expectations, media pressure, and the emotional weight of the Bronny storyline. That is a lot for any front office to carry. And when LeBron publicly suggested the roster lacked enough talent, some people around the organization may have heard more than criticism. They may have heard blame, because front offices do not forget how a roster is built. They remember every trade discussion, every sacrificed draft pick, every veteran signing, every behind-the-scenes request, every move made to keep a superstar happy. So when the same superstar later turns around and says the team did not have enough, that can create real tension. From the outside, it looks like normal NBA drama. Inside the building, it feels different. Executives have to think about the future. Coaches have to manage the locker room. Role players have to wonder if they are being publicly questioned. Young players have to wonder if they are part of the problem. And Bronny has to sit in the middle of all of it, knowing that every discussion about Lakers talent somehow touches his name too. That is what makes the situation so explosive. It is not just LeBron versus the front office. It is LeBron versus the consequences of his own power. For years, being close to LeBron meant access to greatness, but it also meant constant pressure. Pressure to win now. Pressure to trade patience for urgency. Pressure to make moves that might look good in the moment, but become painful later. The Lakers are now facing that exact problem. Do they continue building everything around LeBron's final championship push? Do they protect Bronny's development? Do they reclaim control of the roster? Or do they risk upsetting the most famous player in the league? There is no easy answer, but one thing is clear. The organization can no longer pretend this is only about basketball. This is about identity. Are the Lakers still running the Lakers? Or are they simply reacting to LeBron's next move? That question is dangerous, because once a franchise starts asking it, the relationship with its superstar can change forever. And if the Lakers decide they have had enough, the next chapter could shake the entire NBA. The comparison nobody can avoid. At some point, every LeBron debate ends up in the same place. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. The greatest players are always compared to the legends who came before them. And after this latest controversy, those comparisons exploded all over social media. Not because of statistics, not because of championships, not because of MVP award, because of leadership. Fair or unfair, many fans began asking how other legends would have handled the exact same situation. When Jordan lost, the public narrative was simple. He took the criticism. When Kobe lost, the cameras often captured frustration, anger, and disappointment. But many fans respected one thing about him. He rarely wanted excuses attached to his failure. That is why this LeBron controversy gained so much traction. Critics argued that a leader's job is to absorb pressure, not redirect it. A leader is supposed to stand in front of the storm, not step to the side and point at everyone else. Supporters immediately pushed back. They reminded everyone that LeBron has spent more than 2 decades carrying impossible expectations. More finals appearances than most franchises. More scrutiny than almost any athlete in modern history. More responsibility than the average superstar could ever imagine. And they have a point. Very few players have lived under a microscope like LeBron. Every game is analyzed. Every interview is dissected. Every quote becomes a headline. Every loss becomes a national discussion. But that is exactly why his words matter more than anyone else's. When LeBron speaks, the basketball world listens. When LeBron criticizes something, people pay attention. When LeBron suggests a roster lacks talent, fans immediately start looking for target. That is the price of influence. The larger your platform becomes, the heavier your words become. That is why the story refuses to disappear, because the debate is no longer about one podcast clip. The debate is about accountability. Should a superstar have the freedom to publicly challenge organizational decisions? Or should leaders protect the people around them regardless of circumstances? Neither side agrees, and that disagreement is fueling the entire controversy. Meanwhile, something even more interesting is happening. The Lakers are approaching a critical offseason. Contracts need decisions. Roster spots need evaluation. Future plans need clarity. And for the first time in years, there appears to be genuine uncertainty surrounding LeBron's long-term future. The organization is watching, the league is watching, fans are watching, because if this relationship continues to fracture, the consequences could extend far beyond Los Angeles. And that is where the story becomes truly unpredictable, because the next move belongs to LeBron himself. The offseason decision. The most dangerous part is not what LeBron said, it is what happens next. The Lakers are now facing a major offseason. For years, every move has been built around LeBron's timeline. Win now, trade future assets, add veterans, keep the championship window alive. But time changes everything. LeBron is still great, but the Lakers must ask a hard question. Should they keep building around his final years or start protecting their future? That question gets even harder because Bronny is now part of the story. If the Lakers move forward with LeBron, Bronny's development remains under the brightest spotlight in basketball. If they shift away, the entire father-son project becomes uncertain. LeBron still has power. His name alone changes a franchise's direction. But the Lakers also have a responsibility to think beyond one season. That is where the tension begins. LeBron is thinking about legacy. The Lakers are thinking about control. And when those two goals stop matching, even the strongest relationship can crack. So, the biggest question now is simple. Will LeBron and the Lakers still want the same future? The media machine turns against him. For most of his career, LeBron controlled the conversation better than anyone. When he won, the story was greatness. When he lost, the story often became roster problems, injuries, coaching, or front office mistakes. But this time, the same media machine that helped protect his image started turning the spotlight back on him. Because fans are not just listening anymore. They are comparing, they are replaying clips, they are asking who built this roster, who pushed this direction, and who benefited from the decisions that now look questionable. That is why the podcast comment became so dangerous. It gave critics a perfect opening. They could say LeBron wanted influence when the team was being built, but distance when the team failed, and that narrative is hard to escape. The more he talks, the more every word gets studied. The more he explains, the more people question the motive. That is the downside of building your own platform. You get to speak directly to the fan, but you also create your own evidence. Now the Lakers drama is no longer being told only by reporters. It is being fueled by LeBron's own words. And once a superstar loses control of the narrative, the next chapter can get very ugly. The Bronny question. If LeBron's future becomes uncertain, Bronny's future becomes even more complicated. That is the part nobody can ignore, because Bronny is not just another young player fighting for minutes. His entire NBA story is connected to LeBron's presence in Los Angeles. If LeBron stays, the spotlight stays. If LeBron leaves, the questions get even louder. Would the Lakers still be patient with Bronny's development? Would they send him to the G League and let him grow quietly? Or would they see him as part of a chapter they are ready to close? That is the uncomfortable reality. Bronny needs time. He needs space. He needs a normal development path. But nothing about this situation is normal. Every move he makes is judged through his father's legacy. Every mistake becomes proof for critics. Every small improvement gets buried under the bigger drama. And that is unfair to him, because at the center of all this noise is still a young player trying to find his way in the hardest basketball league on earth. LeBron wanted a historic family moment. The Lakers wanted to keep their superstar happy. The media wanted a perfect story. But now, the person carrying the heaviest pressure may be Bronny himself. And that leads to the final lesson of this entire situation. A legacy can inspire people, but if it becomes too heavy, it can also trap them. The real lesson behind the drama. At the end of the day, this story is bigger than LeBron James. It is bigger than the Lakers. It is even bigger than Bronny. Because what we are really watching is a collision between legacy, leadership, family, and expectations. For more than 2 decades, LeBron has built one of the greatest careers in sports history. His accomplishments are undeniable. His impact on basketball is permanent. Future generations will study his career long after he retired. But greatness also comes with responsibility. The higher you climb, the more people depend on your decision. The more influence you gain, the more your words map. And sometimes, a single comment can create consequences you never intended. That is why this entire situation feels so fascinating to NBA fans. Some people believe LeBron was simply being honest. Others believe he should have taken more responsibility. Some blame the Lakers front office. Others blame the pressure surrounding Bronny. The truth probably lives somewhere in the middle. Because sports are rarely as simple as heroes and villains. Teams win together, teams lose together, and when expectations become unrealistic, everyone ends up carrying part of the burden. The biggest lesson may actually belong to Bronny. His journey reminds us how difficult it can be to create your own identity when the world constantly compares you to someone else. Most young athletes get the opportunity to fail privately. Bronny has had to grow publicly. Most prospects develop away from the spotlight. Bronny developed directly underneath it. Whether people support him or criticize him, that challenge is impossible to ignore. As for the Lakers, they now face a defining moment. The next decisions they make could shape the franchise for years. Will they continue chasing one final championship run? Will they begin building for the future? Will LeBron remain part of that future? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the next chapter of the story may be even bigger than the last one. And when the offseason begins, every move, every rumor, every decision, and every quote will be watched by the entire basketball world. Now, we want to hear from you. Was LeBron right to speak honestly about the roster? Or should franchise leaders protect their teammates and organization publicly, no matter what? Drop your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this video with fellow NBA fans. And before you go, press 1 if you support LeBron's comments. Press 2 if you think he crossed the line. No matter where you stand, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next NBA story.